This is Shifting Our Schools, episode 70, Managing the Change.
If you're looking to become an expert designer of authentic, purposeful, technology-rich learning experiences for your students, you've come to the right place.
Welcome to Shifting Our Schools with your host, Jeff Udick.
Well, welcome back, everybody, to Shifting Our Schools. Thank you for tuning in this week, and thank you to all of you who have left a rating or a review for us on iTunes. The last I checked, we were at 13 ratings and 6 reviews. My goal is, of course, to hit 15 ratings and reviews, as many reviews as possible. And you can do that all from your phone right after you get done listening to this episode. It just helps us spread the word and be found in the iTunes store along with other podcast stores. So we just really appreciate anytime you can leave us a review or a rating. Again, my goal was 15 reviews by the end of October, and we're at 13. And so if you could head over there and just give us a rating or review, we'd really appreciate it. You know, when the fall hits and you have that day when it all of a sudden sinks in that it's fall, that's today here in Seattle. It's been just a beautiful last couple of weeks, and all of a sudden today the high is around 59 degrees. It's been rainy and wet all day, and my wife and I are walking around the house, and all of a sudden we're both having to put on sweatshirts and sweaters for the first time. And so fall is definitely here upon us in Seattle. And it's almost a somber moment. You're like, oh, you know this day's going to come. And then it finally comes. So that's just kind of where we're at. Another little quick update. Some of you might have noticed there were some episodes missing from the list in your podcast player if you're subscribed to us, which I hope you are. If you're subscribed to us, we were missing a couple episodes, and it was brought to my attention by Lisa the other day, and she was like, episode 69 never posted, and we were having some problems with the plugin. I just want to let everybody know we got all of those fixed. So if you didn't get episode 69 on Wednesday last week, I apologize for that. We had a little problem with the website and the plugin and getting things to iTunes and the Google Play Store. And so, but everything's fixed now. But if you missed some of those episodes, it looked like episodes 62 through 64 were missing, which included a little rant I had about kids these days, as well as my 2018 keynote. If you missed that, you might want to go back and check those out. Some really good episodes in there as well. But I think we got everything fixed, and this should come out on time as well. We're going to jump right into it. Not a whole lot this week. I just want to make sure we get you your free PDF of the week, and also talk about the sale we have going on to our bundle. So the first thing is this week, your free PDF is 3 simple ways to create a connected classroom. It's a free PDF. It's a quick guide to getting your students connected outside the walls of your classroom. And I continue to harp on this idea that one of the things that we say technology can do is break down the walls of our classroom. And it's things like this, 3 simple ways to create a connected classroom, is what we're talking about, the power of technology in the hands of students. Also, to go with that, we are having a flash sale to continue this week on our bundle of courses we call Digital Literacy in the Connected Classroom. It's 3 courses, fantastic, full of resources and videos from our my colleague, Chrissy Hellier, also one of the founders over at Eduro Learning. Just some really great basic ideas to get started. You've got computers in your classroom. You have an internet connection in your school. You need to be connecting your kids. It's that simple. That is why we give every kid the power of the internet. And so you can get this course. It's actually 3 courses in a bundle. And again, the bundle is Digital Literacy in the Connected Classroom. It's a 3-course bundle that we usually sell for $69, but for this week, until the end of this week, it's on sale for just $25. So you get 3 courses, 3 online courses for $25. They're all self-paced. You can go through them at your own pace. We are there to support you if you have any questions. And again, when you connect with us here at Eduro Learning, you have a global audience. We have Kim Confino sitting in Bangkok. We have Chrissy Hellier sitting in New Zealand. We've got a host of our own personalized learning via Twitter and network that you get to connect into. You take our courses, you get us in our network as well. So it's just a really, really good value. If that interests you, please head over and buy that now before that sale ends. And of course, you can get all of this at sospodcast.org. And then at the top, you can click on CT, which stands for Connected Teacher. So that's sospodcast.org. And then you can click on the CT at the top for Connected Teacher. Of course, all the links will also be in the show notes. So if you could open this up on your phone, find the show notes, and you will get there as well. All right. This week, I had a chance to sit down with Danny Baur. Danny is a podcaster, a consultant, and an online instructor helping school leaders manage change. His Better Leaders, Better Schools podcast is one of the top rated educational podcasts in iTunes. And his online community called Mastermind, he has a community called the Mastermind Community, is a global community of school leaders coming together to chat about their school. Today, we focus in on helping to manage the change around technology and bringing all of your stakeholders together, parents and students and teachers, around the idea of changing when we move into a one-to-one environment or when we really start thinking about how does technology influence the everyday learning of students. And with that, on with the show. All right, well, welcome everybody to Shifting Our Schools. I'm so excited to have Danny here with us, Danny Baur, who has his own podcast, and I'm sure we'll hear more about that. But today's show is going to be really focused on leadership, whether that's from a school leadership or leadership within your school as a TOSA, tech coach, or even a department head. And what are the changes and some ideas and strategies for going through that change when we give every kid a device and just change in general in schools. So Danny, welcome to Shifting Our Schools. Appreciate you taking time to be with us here today.
Hey, Jeff, man, thank you so much for inviting me to be on the show, and love the work that you're doing there at Shifting Our Schools. And I'm here to hopefully just provide tremendous value to your listeners. It's an honor to spend this time with you.
All right, so let's get started. First of all, why don't you give us a little bit of background of just where you've come from, kind of what is the work that you do with schools now?
Yeah, sure. So the history, that I have, I've been a classroom teacher for quite a while. Assistant instructional coach, assistant principal. I worked at central office, working with a variety of schools too. And my last position in a building was principal 2 years ago in Houston. At that time, I was in year two or three. Yeah, year 2 or 3 of Better Leaders, Better Schools. So my podcast has been out for 3 years, and I was at a interesting pivot point. My wife, who's a research scientist, she studies diabetes in immigrant populations, and that's the expanse of my knowledge of what she does. She wanted to try, researching overseas.
Yeah.
And so we had to have some difficult conversations, but it actually wasn't that hard. At that point, I realized that Better Leaders was thriving. And although I loved the work and serving at a local school, I thought if I pursued it full time that we would be okay. And that proved to be true. So we moved to Antwerp, Belgium. Where is that? Who knows? I had to look it up on a map. And she was doing her research. I was running Better Leaders, Better Schools, the podcast. And that's been going on for 3 years. The other work that I do, I started a second podcast, a school leadership series. It's Monday through Friday, 5 minutes or less, daily inspiration for the modern educator. And then, the way I guess earn my income and put food on the table is I serve 44 clients in a mastermind, a group coaching setting. From 7 different countries around the world. Mm-hmm. So the elevator pitch that, I got dialed in 15 seconds or less is that I help school leaders fight isolation and frustration via a leadership community, that's the mastermind, in order to gain clarity and find solutions to their greatest challenges. So we meet weekly for an hour. We dig into the, biggest problems that they have, and we solve them. So that's a bit about what I do.
That's cool. And you're international. Are they local international schools? Are they international schools that are abroad, or who is that clientele?
Yeah, so the 7 different countries, like the majority of clients are American and Canadian for sure.
Okay.
And the schools that are not there's one, Clayton is in Australia, and he is an Australian, leading an Australian school. Yeah. And then I won't go through everybody, but Eileen, for example, is in China, and she's leading an international school.
Right.
Yeah. So it's a little bit of everything.
That's great. So we have a very much a similar crossover in audience, as well as we have a very international, audience, with myself teaching in international schools for 10 years.
Nice.
We have a pretty good following internationally as well. So this should be a really good podcast. And I think what we want to do is just kind of dive into, there's a lot of things that happen in a school, and this podcast is focused specifically on technology and instructional changes. But I think we all know that that doesn't happen without a leadership that is ripe for change to begin with. And a lot of the work that we do is help schools, for better or for worse. But a lot of times schools are looking for something to help them change or to move forward into a new kind of instructional model. And for better or for worse, when you give every kid a laptop or you go one-to-one, that is something to basically hang your hat on, right? You can say, look, we're going to do something completely different. And then trying to manage that change on a large scale of, say, a 2,000 student high school or a 3,000 student high school, or, an international school that is K-12, 4,000 students K-12. And so just wondering, like, where would you start in this idea of, okay, we're giving every kid a laptop. What is your first thing as a leader that you kind of try to help teachers manage that change and the idea shifts that have to happen once we have that new kind of pedagogy on the table?
Yeah, so hopefully you don't roll it out, all at once and just blow things up. Jim Collins is famous for saying bullets before cannonballs.
Yeah.
And I know you're a design thinking guy, and that type of philosophy and principle. The idea there for me is to pilot it, right? So you always start small with some type of cohort, and those are the early adopters too, and you just see what's going on, right? And let them build it with you too. So before you introduce it district-wide or school-wide, whatever you're doing, start small, collaborate with the user, so the student or the parent, I don't know, whatever change, we're talking pretty broadly here with that, and get that data, get that feedback. It's those focus groups, right? Where you're just asking questions and finding out about what's working and what's not, what's broken, what we need to fix, what do you want more of, and just being very open to, the end user, so the student, right? A lot of times as leaders, we have a sense of, if we do X, everything's going to be better. Yeah. And great. Oh, well, I'm glad you feel that way. And I'm glad that you're so confident in what we need to do, whatever that X is. Yeah. And the people are not bought in, right? And it might completely ignore like what their needs are. So as a business owner or as a podcaster, as a principal of a building, I need to know my people. And one of the questions I want to ask is like, what are their pain points? What are their struggles? What do they enjoy, right? Yeah. And whatever I decide to do, and in this terms we're talking about technology, it should serve them, right? To move the ball forward, and it definitely should be in service to whatever their needs are.
So let's break down some of those audiences, and let's start. I think one of the things that we are really focused on as a company this year is that parent community, because we have done some market research over the last couple of months that have found that parents, the research shows that I'm going to make sure I get this right. 89% of parents wish that schools would provide some kind of tech training towards parents. And then we went out to administrators in schools and said, do you want to offer parent trainings? And we had 97% of administrators say, we'd love to offer trainings to parents. So parents want the training. The administrators or leaders say that we want to give this training. Where would you start then as a school leader to bring that community, your parent community, into a conversation over exactly what are you looking for? What is that pain point or that pinch point? Yeah. How do you start those conversations with your community to really start to understand what it is they want or need?
Well, I think it's great. Like, if I understand correctly, that there's a survey that goes out and you identified a need, right? Yeah. And so from there, and then the administrators too said, yeah, we want to offer this. So now what do we offer? Well, that's just another question. So, based on us providing technology training, in what realm, do you want that to be? Does that have to be like, in terms of how to navigate social media with your student, or how to use a certain type of device? I don't even know what they would say. Right. But I would just ask. So, okay, you said you want training. What kind of trainings would you like? Or, for example, this is a place where you can lead the way a bit with vision and say, we're thinking of offering these 10 to 15 trainings. Pick your top 5. And from there, you're going to get invaluable data to say exactly like what people want. A little nugget of truth that I want to share too with the listeners then is that, sometimes we might get overwhelmed as a principal or as a TOSA, as you call them. That was
Yeah.
I haven't heard that before. So
Oh,
thank
you
you
haven't? Oh, that's
for,
a big thing here in the Northwest. We're called teachers
yeah.
on special assignment to the coaches.
Okay. So thank you for teaching me a new acronym. I needed to
That's what you needed, a new one, huh? Yeah.
Yeah, totally. But the cool thing is, or the fear is sometimes, well, I don't know how to provide the training too. Well,
Yeah.
you don't. Who says you have to, right? One of the best questions that you can ask as a leader, and you're trying to institute and implement change, is why? Why do we do it this way? Why do we have to do it that way? And to give you a clear example in my own personal life. So my second podcast, School Leadership Series, 5 minutes daily, right? Like I already talked about that, inspiration on your way to work. And recently I applied this question to the podcast, and I said, why do I have to host my own podcast? I don't.
Yeah.
And as a white male, I know that I have a certain perspective, I have privilege, I have some biases, and I really appreciate the diversity that's around me, that's in the mastermind, and what that all brings to the table. And what I've realized too, Better Leaders, I would say, is the #1 downloaded show for school leaders, that niche.
Yeah.
I want to steward that platform responsibly. I want to take it to the next level. So when I said, why do I host my own show? I don't have to. So I'm inviting diverse voices, whether you want to cut that around, race, ethnicity, gender, religious beliefs, sexuality. I'm going to bring everybody on. They're going to speak their truth about education and leadership. And so, I'm telling your listeners, you might not even have the one to offer the training. There might be people locally or even virtually. We're connecting on Zoom. That's how the mastermind connects. Yeah. Maybe somebody can Skype in, Zoom in, and it doesn't necessarily have to be you. So I hope the listeners take a deep breath here. All right, with me. Like, it doesn't necessarily have to be you that offers that training. Hopefully that takes a bit of the pressure off too.
Yeah. And I think what I'm finding too is in just that scenario, in asking the why question, I find that a lot of leaders, schools decide to go one-to-one because it's the cool thing to do at the moment, giving every kid a laptop, giving every kid. And I think a lot of times that idea of a why isn't fully, it's either not fully fleshed out, or it hasn't been presented to the community in a way that the community understands and knows why my child is now coming home with a Chromebook, or my child's coming home with a device. And so even to the point where, you're like, ask the parent community, do you want to help with your kids on social media? I don't even think, I could be completely wrong. I would say the majority of school leaders don't even know the questions to ask, right? To even get that information, to know what parents might want. What is the specific thing around technology? Because we just assume, we say technology, and it's just supposed to cover like everything from social media to creating podcasts to, a kid being on their phone, and they're so specific.
Checking their grades, everything.
Yeah, exactly. Checking their grades, uploading stuff into a content system. Like, we just call it all technology rather than being very specific to find out what those specific needs are. So how would you, as a leader, then, like, would you create a maybe like PTA or PTO groups, bring them in to figure out what that is? Like, what kind of time, management around those parent groups specifically, then would you how would you find the answer, so you even know what question, or how would you find the questions to even ask? How would you go about that?
Yeah. I'd find somebody passionate like you to help with the process. Because the thing is, I know that as a leader, I think just as a human being, your most valuable resource is time, right? And it's a mistake. And people think too, and sometimes it goes to ego, that you have to do it all. And you can tell I'm kind of beating this drum a bit in the podcast. It doesn't have to always be you. And so you got to think about who can you delegate and build a team to actually do those things. And if that's not your strength, in terms of finding out the questions, right? And figuring out like how to serve your community at a high level. Again, well, why does it have to be you? But you need to know how to ask for help, who to ask for help. Listen to this podcast, I think, is a great start. And then looking in your community, who's passionate. Your teachers that love X, Y, and Z, right? If I think about the last school I served in as principal, if I needed somebody to lead an ultimate Frisbee club, I knew exactly who to ask. Scott, right? He's, he was like that quintessential puppy dog, man, just younger teacher, full of energy, and he say yes to everything, right? Yeah. And you got to be careful with that. You don't want to overwhelm him. Sure. But the point is that he loved kids. If there was a need, it was a club. and it would be good for everybody, then he would say yes. And so you got to know your people, their strengths, their weaknesses, and who you could plug in. And so hopefully there's somebody within your building that you could say, I need you to take the lead in that. And then my job, because this is what I believe about leadership, I cast the vision so everybody in the organization knows where we're going. There's a quote that I absolutely love that is where, in terms of vision, you cast a vision that people will run to it, right?
Mm-hmm.
Write the vision down so that those who read it will run. If it's inspiring enough, people are going to implement it. They're going to be excited about it. So I cast vision, I resource, I empower, right? So definitely provide everything that people need to be successful. And then part of it too is I remove obstacles. So if I add one thing to the plate, like I'm adding 1-to-1 to what we're doing at the school,
Right.
Guess what, school leader? I hope you asked why you're doing it. And now that you've decided that it is a good thing for your community, well, what are you taking away? Because you just added something. And since we're talking about technology, okay, the new phone, woo, all right, super cool. That's really fun. And the thing that we love about Apple, for example, is the simplicity, the beauty of the design. It just works, right?
Yeah.
I used to be an Android guy. I loved it because I would root the phone. I would flash a new operating system.
Yeah.
So some of those toasters are like nerding out now, like, oh, cool. And then I realized, you know what? I'm spending so much time doing this garbage. And sometimes I'd break it and then I'd have to figure out how to fix it. And I always did. But I moved to Apple because it just works and it's simple. And every time they add a feature, they take one away. So that's a good principle too. When you're going to add that thing, what are you taking back? And you don't have to do everything yourself.
So it sounds like to me, like you really believe in like a servant leadership model of leading schools. Can you talk a little bit for those that don't know the whole like premise or understanding of a servant leadership model? Because you basically just explained it, but can you kind of maybe just go into more? What does that mean as a leader to serve, to be a servant leader?
Yeah. I'm not going to get like spiritual about this, but I was involved in like a Wednesday night home group that was connected to a church. Okay, so I'll leave it at that.
Yeah.
But one of the things we did is we went to a homeless shelter. We would serve food and we would clean up. We would put on like a Christmas show. And throughout the year, we did a number of things with the men that lived there that were in transition. And I was being groomed to lead one of the groups, right? So I was also starting to get a bit of an ego. And maybe the guy leading the group, Gino, saw that in me. And so what Gino, the leader of the group, and me, the second in command, what we did, we got to clean the toilets. Like that's what he chose to do every freaking time we went there. And who likes cleaning toilets?
Yeah.
Dude, I don't even barely clean it. I mean, I clean it at my house, but it's just
you don't
like
look forward to it, right? Yeah.
No, you don't look forward to it. And this is in a transitional shelter, so it's not the cleanest place. Let's say that's servant leadership. When you are willing to do the things you're asking all your people to do, and nothing is below you. There's people, and we all know them. If I ask you right now, Jeff, who is that boss who was so full of it? His head was so big. Her head was so big. They love that title. They make you call them doctor when they have a PhD.
Yeah.
Right? So servant leadership is the antithesis, the opposite of that.
Yeah. I love that. And I'm very much a believer in that type of leadership style too. And I think especially for, I would say those at a building level or department heads or TOSA/coaches, in a school district or in a school, that is one of the best ways I have ever found to create those opportunities to form relationships with your colleagues. As a tech coach, I was a tech coach, was my last role in the school before, I jumped the ship. And I just remember like it was, when somebody said, when you got a text message that said, oh my gosh, my projector's not working, I would run to that classroom, to be able to fix that problem in the moment or to set something up, come in early the next day to make sure everything was working because this teacher was going to try something that was outside their comfort zone, right? Yeah. And being able to be there and show support, you can move so much faster when you have leadership like that in a school. Yeah. How would you then, as a school leader, if we try to transition from thinking about the parent community to maybe students in your school, would you use a servant leadership or around this change management? A lot of schools I think have a really rough time, as they go one-to-one or they start to infuse more technology in helping students to understand what does this mean for them and their learning as well? And what are some strategies or ideas that you might have with school leaders around bringing students into that conversation of change as well?
sometimes we have this assumption that like the kids aren't necessarily old enough to get it. You
Yeah.
know, I don't know if you resonate with that message. And you know, the leaders that I respect the most, you know, they have those like principal committees, right?
Yeah.
Of course, they're at the high school and they're really, you know, they're planning prom and I don't know, all sorts of cool things at the
Yeah.
school. But at the middle school, at the elementary school, why not? And
Yeah.
so you're teaching leadership, you're giving them voice, you're teaching them how to critically think, right? At that, it doesn't matter the age. So again, just like the parents and going back to how we started the podcast, the bullets before the cannonballs,
Yeah.
start small, pilot, get a group of kids together that want to be on the principal committee, you know, and maybe they get a little badge or a shirt or, you know,
Yeah.
you can make it a moment and something that they celebrate at graduation or whatever, and just get them involved early and really let them lead. So
Yeah.
it's not that much different than leading, you know, your staff. Again, casting the vision, empowering them, and removing the obstacles. You know, I had a group eighth graders that wanted to do this, you know, robotics challenge, science thing, and there was some money in the competition and all that kind of stuff. And I said, cool, I want you to do it too. So figure out, make a plan, let me know how you're going to do it, and then tell me where you need help for me to plug in. But I wasn't going to solve the problem for them, right? A lot of times as a leader, you know, we think that we need to. And as a classroom teacher, sixth grade, I remember, you know, you think that sixth graders would know how to open their lockers, right?
Yeah.
Like how to do a combination. And I'll tell you, Jeff, for like 10 years, I used to be so mad because I would run out there when they asked because I love helping.
Yeah.
But I also would be frustrated that, man, I need to write a lesson plan or I have kids coming in. I got a class to be ready for. You can't figure out your freaking locker. But I do it anyways, but I wouldn't do it joyfully, right? So that was a character, a hard issue. I ended up working on that and, you know, figured it out for the most part.
Yeah.
But the key pivot moment for me was to say, oh, no, like, what are you going to do? When I realized it wasn't necessarily my problem to solve, and I helped people see that they had the agency to do it, all of a sudden, most of those problems that I was engaged in just melted away. And that freed me up to really hone in on my narrow brilliance.
I like that. You talk a lot about like, you know, helping to get obstacles out, removing obstacles. Can you give some examples of like obstacles you've seen or you've heard stories from leadership, like where maybe they don't see it as an obstacle? Like, you know, they're talking through it and you can say like, well, that's an obstacle for your teachers or your staff, or is that something you're trying to get over? Can you talk about maybe what are some of those obstacles that you have seen in schools that maybe, I don't know, people don't see or realize could be an obstacle to change?
This is a great question, which is what everybody says when they're buying time to think, right? I would say in the mastermind, in my one-on-one sessions, folks have a pretty good awareness that the challenge exists or what the problems are. And that's why actually this question is a pretty big challenge for me. I don't know right now that I have a great concrete example that there's a school leader and they're trying to implement some type of change, but they don't see it as a challenge. I think the best example I can give is it has to do with assumptions that we make about the people we serve and lead. And let's go with the one-to-one that we've been talking about. And you're casting that vision and you've empowered the teachers, right? And you've given them the resources, and the devices stay in the lockers or the closet, or, you know, they're not being used.
Right.
And now you're like, gosh darn it, these people are against me, right?
Yeah.
They are not bought in. We're going to have to go toe to toe and battle this out. And the assumption that we make is that there's resistance, right? So I'm glad I'm talking out loud and processing this with you. But I think the idea there, and we read this in the mastermind 2.5 years ago, Switch by Chip and Dan Heath. Have you read that by any chance?
Yeah, I have. Yeah, it's a good book.
Yes. So you remember they talked about that what often looks like resistance might be something different. And again, asking the critical questions and going deeper. Maybe it's a fear that, all right, now that we introduce the one-to-one, what if I don't know how to teach that way? I haven't been adequately trained.
Right.
Oh, training. Like you got time for another podcast? Like that's, you see what I'm saying?
Yeah.
But there's other things going on under the surface that, often our default is they're against me. It's win-lose, and there's a problem and I need to fix it, right?
Yeah.
And so that's the challenge a lot of leaders don't see is like, no, and we read Thinking Fast and Slow. Have you read that?
I haven't read that one, huh?
That's a good one. Two systems, system one, system two, in terms of how our brain works. And one of them is your gut, your emotions. It's the snap decisions, which you got to learn to trust your gut. But there's a paradox. I'm going to talk about out both sides of my mouth. But you also have to question your gut. And there's the system two thinking that's much more logical. It's deliberate. It's slow. It questions everything. Because there's resistance. That's a system one. It's a snap decision, us versus them. But wait a second, what else might be going? And you start slowing down that process, and you actually get to the real answer. And there's ways to teach yourself to do that.
I like that. And I would say specifically around one-to-one, like the things that I hear exactly what you're talking about is like, a lot of it becomes, I think we characterize it as leaders of fear. And I don't think it's always fear, fear of, I don't know how to teach this way, fear of, now that we've gone one-to-one, they expect students to be on the devices all the time. And that's not what I believe as a teacher. And there's a lot of things I think that teachers go through with that as leaders, we just look at it as fear. And then we end up in us versus them, right? An us versus them relationship where many times I have found that that's not really what it is. It's not a fear. It's a not knowing. And it's being cast, especially for a lot of educators for the first time, for the first time in a long time, not knowing what to do. You've just given every kid a laptop that has access to the world through an internet connection. And I don't know how to teach that way, and I don't know what that means for me
or how
as
to
a
protect
teacher
them.
or how to protect them.
Protect them just by shutting it down. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And I think there's a lot of things when we use the word fear, but it is, you've really got to dig into what is that, because it's very easy at like you're saying at level one to say, well, they're just scared. But there's a lot more to what is behind that idea of fear a lot of times than just scared of the device or scared of students or scared I'm going to lose my job. I find that it's quite deeper than that many times.
Yeah, and there's a connection there to, again, at the beginning of the podcast with the specificity of the questions you need to ask, right? Yeah. So not what do you want to learn about technology, because that runs the gamut of social media to everything, but being very specific in what you offer.
Yeah. Yeah, I love that. Well, thank you so much for taking some time out of your day to spend with us and talk about leadership and around school change. Is there any final words from you or things you'd like to plug or talk a little bit more about your mastermind? Is it a cohort that you run all the time? Is it once a year thing? How does that work?
Yeah, thanks, Jeff. I want to give a practical activity that everybody can use, just to add some value to the show, and then I'll talk about those things. It's called the GE workout process. Do you know that?
No, I haven't heard this one.
So this one is it's really quick. Give everybody in your organization a sticky pad of notes, and this meeting will only be 5 minutes, and my description will be even less. And so you're going to say, we want to do X, whatever. I'll give you an example. One-on-one client, $350,000 budget shortfall. Okay. Yeah. Needs kids in the seats to be able to cover it. Right. How are we going to do it? And she had a couple ideas, and they were strong ideas. I said, bring your team together, give them the reality of what's going on, and ask them for, 5 to 10, as many ideas as they could come up with in 5 minutes. And after that, everybody's there jotting down on the stickies. Stickies go on the wall. It's not a discussion. It's not like merit-based, like which idea is best, but it's just creative, right? And so since I know you're into tech and design thinking, I think your listeners will like that. So that's the GE workout process.
I like that.
In regards to the mastermind, that's a rolling admissions, okay? So if you go to the blog, betterleadersbetterschools.com/MM, you could read all about it, all the value, all the transformation that you'll get if you decide to join. There's an application. It's by application only. So, of course, there's an investment, but you can't throw money at me and join. We have an interview like we're doing this podcast, and I have to vet, make sure you're high quality enough to come in the group. There's a couple of recorded meetings. There's video testimonials. So believe me, betterleadersbetterschools.com/MM. You'll get all the information you want. We talked all about like great questions to ask and critical thinking. So if you just go to the blog, betterleadersbetterschools.com, you could download 3 questions I ask myself every single day. And the last thing I'm going to show you, Jeff, the listeners can't see it, but my new book is out. All right. So for three years, Jeff, I've been hustling and just offering value through the podcast, and that's all free. And the mastermind is a premium and exclusive leadership group. Maybe that's for you, maybe not. I hope it is. But there's the book. And it's, so if you've connected at all with the type of message that I'm sharing, that kind of stuff, I promise you, is in the book. Book is called Better Leaders, Better Schools Roadmap, sticking with the brand. Yeah, you don't even have to type the whole thing into Amazon. You just get to Better LE and it will pre-populate for you. That's how popular. Very cool. Yeah, #1 hot new release in Amazon. So congrats. I would love it if some people checked out the book, visited the website. And Jeff, thanks again for having me on the show.
No, thank you. I really appreciate you taking time out of your schedule. And we'll make sure that links to everything, including the book, are in the show notes. As soon as we hang up here, I'll just ask you to send me an email with all the links, and we'll make sure those make it into the show notes today. Danny, thank you so much for taking time. I really appreciate it.
Absolutely. Thanks for having me, Jeff.
Thank you for listening to Shifting Our Schools with your host, Jeff Udick. Shifting Our Schools is part of the Eduro Learning Podcast Network. For more great content, visit sospodcast.org or follow us at Eduro Learning on Facebook and Twitter. Leave a review, rate, and subscribe. And we'll catch you next time on Shifting Our Schools.